You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster Carole Malone and the Belfast Telegraph columnist Allison Morris. They'll be with us from now right up until just before midnight. So let's see what's coming up on the front pages for you now. Well, the Metro leads with Water UK saying they'll subsidise £10 billion of improvements to the nation's waterways, but customers will be made to pay for it in the end. The paper calls it a dirty trick. The Financial Times reports on BT's plans to cut 55,000 jobs, which would amount to 42% of its workforce, some of whom could be replaced by AI technology. According to the Eye, the government is exploring whether it may be necessary to bring in laws to stop companies doing just that. The Mail throws ahead to a possible AI jobs bloodbath. Reporting from the G7 meeting, The Guardian has news of fresh British sanctions against Russia over the war in Ukraine. The Express has Rishi Sunak backing himself to win the next general election. UK's reliance on foreign nurses is at a critical level, writes The Times. The drive to net zero will add an estimated £120 to energy bills, reports The Telegraph. The Mirror has the story of a 6-year-old boy who survived a dog attack. And on a much different note, The Star ponders the appeal, or otherwise, of Y-front underpants. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Carole Malone and Allison Morris. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the Metro front page and this £10 billion, as they say, of dirty tricks. Carole, explain.
It's astonishing. This is the cost that's going to be borrowed by the water companies, because they have been dumping tons and tons of sewage, raw sewage, into our rivers and seas. I mean, some of the figures for the amount that they were dumping was something like 865 tonnes a day or something. And it's just astonishing. And Ruth Kelly, who was the boss of Water UK, she came out with this half-hearted apology, and she said, well, sorry we didn't act sooner to fix this, but hey, we get it. I mean, you get it. It's, this is raw sewage pumped into our water, which contains bacteria and viruses. It affects the fish life. It affects all sorts of other ecosystems in our waters. And we paid for this service. I don't know, I mean, mine is Thames Water in London. Seriously, I pay a fortune every year for water. And now they want me to pay again, because this £10 billion that they're borrowing to fix their antiquated Victorian systems is going to come out of our pockets over the next 50 to 100 years. It seems astonishing when, the shareholders, Gillian, in these companies, on average every year, they get paid £2 billion since they were privatised 30 years ago. Last year, I think the industry paid 1.4 billion to shareholders, but generally it's an average of £2 billion. Why isn't the money for these repairs and what needs to be done, why isn't it coming out of the CEO's bonuses, of the shareholders' profits? Why are we having to pay twice for what was already a shoddy service?
Yes, the Water UK is saying that they have apologised for the 300,000 sewage dumps in rivers, and that whatever customers will have to pay will be modest increments. Alison, is that enough?
Well, I don't. And interestingly, they quote Fergal Sharkey, the former singer of the Undertones, who's a big campaigner on this issue, a man from my part of the world, and he's saying, why should customers have to pay for their incompetence? And I think that's how most customers would see it. It's also, as Carole said, it's completely and utterly filthy. They should be held to account for what they've done, the environmental damage they've caused. And it just made me glad that during lockdown, when everyone had decided that they were going to be cold swimmers and jumping out of freezing water, that I stayed safely at home with a glass of wine and didn't partake in that particular pastime, now that we know how much sewage was being pumped into the waterways.
Yes, you were wise not to jump in, Alison. Let's move on to the Telegraph, and this net zero drive will add £120 to energy bills. Is that a price worth paying, Carole?
Do you know what? We knew this was coming. We knew how much it was going to cost householders. We knew it was going to hit our bills. I don't know if it's a price worth paying quite now. Not at this moment in time when people are already struggling to pay their energy bills. You know, we're hearing now that in council houses and council properties, their bills are going to increase by 300%. How on earth can people afford a rise of another £120 a year? It is astonishing. You know, people have had to be compensated by the government this year to the tune of something, I think it's about £3,000 per household to help cope with all the energy bills. How are they going to cope with more? You know, I get the drive to net zero. I understand it, and I know that, you know, I understand the problems of climate change. But I think, you know, you have to look at the lives people are living now, and they're pretty grim. And there's no let up to these energy bills. We're told they might be a little bit cheaper by the summer, but a little bit cheaper is not much use when you know the bills have gone up by 200% for a lot of people. So I think this is not a price worth paying at this moment in time.
Yes, and it's to defund the development of hydrogen gas under the government's net zero plans. But in the article, it's saying that this would apply despite the fact that hydrogen is expected to play only a limited role in home heating, with the government the main replacement for gas boilers expected to be heat pumps. So, as Carole was saying, Alison, is this unnecessary at this point?
I do think it's very important, and we know it's very important that we protect the planet for our future generations. But the issue is that we are in a cost of living crisis, and energy costs went up massively in the last year. And some people, I know people who own businesses who have had to close their doors as a result of the increased energy costs. They just couldn't afford to pay anymore. And so if we could manage to get those costs back down again, if there could maybe be a cap on the profits that a lot of those big fossil fuel companies make, so that the price of fuel can be kept low, I think if you could do that, well, then it's worth investing this money for the long-term future. But as you said, it doesn't seem that this is a plan that's going to completely and utterly fix our environmental problems. It seems just a very small part of that. And what I'd really like to see is something that is not just a longer term plan, but something that's going to make a massive difference. I mean, we know we rely too heavily on fossil fuels. You know, that's not a secret, but there does need to be a way to phase this out so that people can afford to heat and light their homes. And right now, people are just about managing to do that, are struggling, are on the breadline, relying on food banks, and to say to them another £120 a year, you know, that is the difference between them being able to turn their heating on in the winter or not.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Let's move on to the FT. And this is quite a big story today. BT plans to cull 55,000 jobs this decade, roughly around, I think, 10,000 being attributed or would be replaced by AI technology. Something to fear, Carole, or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. This is going to be 42% of BT's workforce. It's the most aggressive cull since the company was privatised back in the 80s. And the CEO of BT is saying, you know, this is going to bring some significant advances. Well, yes, it is for the people they're going to fire and whose lives they're going to wreck. You know, the thing is, AI, I don't pretend to understand everything that it means, but what I feel is that it's coming too fast and too hard. And it's one of the reasons why Rishi Sunak at the G7 today has called for AI to be regulated, because he's saying it's all happening so fast. And I think there's a group of scientists now who have also come out and said they want rules put in place to protect society, to protect political systems, and also literally to protect human life. Now, you know, this announcement by BT is terrifying. I mean, imagine how unsettling that is if you work for BT, and it comes hot on the heels of Vodafone's decision a couple of days ago to axe a whole bunch of, I think it was 11,000 jobs with Vodafone. So very unsettling for all these people in these industries. You know, it's supposed to be great technological advances, but what does it actually mean for people and humanity? And I don't think we know that yet. So these regulations that Sunak is calling for, I think, have to be put in place, and pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's leading to a lot of insecurity, as you described. The Mail, their headline, AI jobs bloodbath, Alison.
Yeah, I mean, right now there's a sort of scandal in Ireland about the Irish Times, which has always prided itself on being the paper of record, carried an opinion piece by someone calling themselves Adriana Cortez, who said that she was from Ecuador and that the reliance of fake tan by Irish women was cultural appropriation and that she found it offensive. And this obviously acted as clickbait, and there was lots of comments on it, but by that evening it was gone. And it turned out that it's some student who had created this in AI, sent it in, and the Irish Times had carried it. And they had to apologise to the readers for the deception, because it clearly wasn't real. You know, it was completely made up. The writer was made up. This person did not exist. And while that can be quite funny and quite humorous when you think about it, imagine then the deeper, repercussions of that in the long term, the sort of fake news element, if people use that for much more nefarious purposes than what we have seen so far. We're having an election here today in Northern Ireland, local government election, but during our assembly election last year, two very young female candidates both had deep fake porn films spread claiming they were them, and it wasn't. It was completely faked, using that kind of technology. And so we need to be really careful in terms of what this does to people's lives, but also the implications it can have, because we talk a lot about making sure that you sort of double source that your news is coming from the correct sources, and that it has been checked and that it is accurate. But imagine the repercussions if AI was used, widespread used in the media. We could be getting into a situation, especially when it comes to elections and things like that, where it could be used for all the wrong reasons.
Yes, and there has been some concern about the American elections, forthcoming American elections, and the creator of Chat GPT gave a report to Congress saying that they wanted to be regulated, they wanted more regulation, and that does seem to be the area that needs to be investigated, how to control AI that we clearly don't understand the full extent of as yet, Carole.
I mean, imagine how scary it is. This is a new phenomenon that we don't know what it's capable of, and there are no controls over it. As Alison just said there, you can use it to rig news, to rig the news agenda. You could use it to rig elections. It's terrifying. And yet we are using it and employing it, something that we don't actually understand. I watched a scientist the other day try to explain it. I swear to God, I watched for half an hour. And I wasn't much the wiser. And he was having problems. And he was saying that people like him don't fully get what it's capable of. So how the hell are we supposed to? And how are we supposed to regulate something we don't understand? It's scary.
It is quite terrifying. Alison, the Eye, they're saying that there's been a dramatic shift in tone, and the UK is now focusing on the threats posed by AI, and as well as the opportunities. And this comes as the British government is pushing for regulations to, quote, protect humanity against the potential dangers.
Yeah, and there clearly are dangers. And, we know the Prime Minister is now at the G7, and these are the kind of things that will clearly be discussed as part of that, because we don't know, are there security implications? Does this pose a threat in the wrong hands to national security? What other purposes can it be used for? And the fact is that this technology has moved so fast. I mean, just a few days ago, someone had showed me an AI generated story where they had put my name and said, write, 800 words in the style of. Now, it was pretty accurate the way it came out in terms of the style of writing from my newspaper, and it did it within minutes. You could actually see it working its way through it. And if something like that can seem, I suppose, like a bit of a parlour game, but when you think about the consequences of that in the long term, in terms of national security, in terms of politics, in terms of how we live our lives, and also in terms of jobs, and people rely on it. We did have a period of automation where people lost a lot of those industry jobs and were replaced by machinery, but other jobs were created. I can't see that if jobs are replaced by AI, what other jobs are we creating for the people who are going to lose their employment as a result?